And welcome to our pain and pleasure of moving into advisory session. Even though we can't all meet up face to face, we've still managed to bring you some of the leading lights in the advisory space who all use VFD Pro to assist them in delivering advisory services across their client base. We have a mixture of individuals ranging from those who solely offer part-time FD services through to regional multi-office practices who offer advisory services as part of their overall offering, and probably everything in between. First off, we have Robert Green from Evoke Management. Robert has spent the last 30 years as CFO of 3 family-owned groups spanning sectors as diverse as funerals and fast ferries. He's bought, sold, and started multiple companies. He now offers his experience and expertise as either a part-time FD or helping companies raise equity or debt finance in order to upscale their business. Robert has spent a large part of the last 6 months successfully applying for Sybil's funding with the aid of VFD. A fun fact about Robert is he once bought 15 airplanes while sat in a paddling pool on a Greek island. Next, we have Mike Ogilvie from X5 Chartered Accountants. Mike has always enjoyed working on the business advisory side of the accountancy profession. He was a founding member of the UK Association of Profit Advisors and also AVN. After forming X5 Accountants following a 3-way merger in 2019, Mike is now a director and founding member of the new National Zenadin Network of Accountants. Mike has become known as the Profit Man for his conference speaking and business growth services around the world. Next, we have Emma Whitehouse, who's Director of Accounts and Business Services at Barringtons. Emma started working at a small practice in 2007 in Staffordshire. Her career has progressed through many phases from general accounts preparation, audit, taxation, and restructuring work. Having seen many sides of the accounting profession and many different businesses, both great and small, it resonated with her early on that there is more to accountancy than solely churning out year-end accounts. The fun and pivotal side of accountancy is advisory services. In recent years, and even more so in 2020, Barringtons has used technology to its advantage and gone above and beyond in their advisory services. Emma looks to become an integral part of any business she supports, providing support, advice, and a shoulder to cry on when things get tough. She takes particular pleasure in seeing the successes and triumphs in achieving goals. Paul Miller from Cornish Accounting started in accountancy in 1983, training with one of the Big Four. He started Cornish Accounting in 1994 with 2 employees and 70 clients. Now, 26 years later, they still have 35 of their original 70 clients and now employ 12 people who support 250 businesses. Pioneer of cloud accounting, having used Xero since 2011, Cornish Accounting was Xero Partner of the Year in 2015. To celebrate 21 years in business, in 2014, Paul took his entire office to Xerocon in Sydney for the week. Paul believes advisory is all about talking to people and providing what they need, whether it's management accounts, cash flow, budgets, or just a sounding board, with the aim of mixing traditional accounting values with modern technology. Next, we have Sean Farnell of Burgess & Bullock. Burgess & Bullock are a 7-partner regional practice based in Warwickshire. With a 134-year history, the firm is firmly rooted in the traditional accounting workloads, but have always believed that to keep relevant, they don't just have to move with the times, but need to be leading change. Having first run structured business mentoring clubs in 2001, the advisory arm of the firm has grown steadily, culminating in the recent award of 4 cohorts of peer-to-peer action learning groups for the Department of Business, Energy and Industry Strategy. Sean is one of the equity partners, having joined the firm 21 years ago following a successful run of smaller local firms. Sean runs the firm's advisory arm and recently tried to get locked down in southern France, but sadly the travel restrictions weren't quite strict enough to prevent travel home. Finally, we have Joanna Drinkwater of Grant McKnight. Jo is an experienced chartered accountant with 13 years history of both working in practice and industry. She completed her accountancy graduate scheme with PwC in Birmingham, receiving exposure to a variety of business sectors and gained expertise working with a diverse range of clients from owner-managed businesses to quoted PLCs. After 10 years contracting in a range of different roles and traveling to over 50 different countries, she decided to set up her own practice, Grant McKnight, in 2018 and hasn't looked back since. She loves to be involved in the local community, giving back some of her expert knowledge to business owners and contacts alike. Jo has had the privilege of being nominated, shortlisted, and finally chosen as the Future Face of Finance for 2020 by the Future Faces Chamber of Commerce. And in her own words, she absolutely loves helping business owners survive and thrive. Okay, so we have a series of questions that various people have submitted. And Steve, if you'd like to read the first one out, please, I'll direct them to various members of our panel. Emma's experienced some technical issues, so unfortunately we haven't got a video feed, just an audio feed from Emma.
Okay, what was the main tipping point that resulted in you deciding to make advisory a key part of your offer for clients?
Okay, having been the latest entrant into the advisory space, if I can direct that question to Joanna first.
Thank you for the question. Well, funnily enough, the main tipping point that resulted in me taking the decision to offer advisory services to my clients was actually a presentation from Sean Farnell. Sean actually presented firsthand the benefits and, you know, the showcase that advisory added to his practice when I went along to a ICAEW Institute of Chartered Accountants ran presentation last year. So thank you for that, Sean.
Excellent. And I guess if I can direct this question now to someone that's been in the advisory space for quite a while. Paul, have you got anything to add to that?
I think as accountants, we've always been in the advisory space because the question is, what is advisory? And I guess the tipping point for me was, how do you monetize that? How do you get rewards for that? How do you actually ensure that the clients actually understand what you can do and how you can deliver results which help them in their business?
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Steve, what's the next question, please?
So if you were explaining your advisory services to a business owner, how do you describe what you do to help clients when speaking to that average business owner?
Okay, Mike, would you like to provide a response to that one, please?
Yes, I think following on from what Paul was saying, you know, we used to call advisory service that this is your profit and let me advise you about your tax. So the advisory service that we're talking now, if I was talking to a business owner, I'd be saying, well, sometimes you need to understand your accounts because most people run their business according to what's in their bank account. And perhaps actually the bank account might be full of money, but it's only because they haven't paid their bills. What we'd like to do is we'd like to go behind and dig deep underneath the figures, underneath the skin of the business, get into the nuts and bolts and say, actually explain to you what all your figures mean and how were they derived. And looking forward rather than backwards, if you carry on this way, where are you going to end up if you carry on the trend that is evident in your figures?
Excellent. Thanks very much. Thank you. Steve, we've got questions coming in thick and fast. Have you got the next one, please?
Yes. So are you offering advisory services as a standalone service or as part of a package that includes accountancy?
Let's go to Sean. Can you answer that one, please?
Thank you, Mark. My answer, as with so many of these questions, is yes. Both is the honest answer. So we have a number of clients where we've gone from sort of the traditional compliance to advisory as an add-on, whether that's as a result of doing regular management accounting work and then building in regular meetings from there. So that would be packaged in and bundled into a monthly fixed fee. And then we also run business mentoring and mastermind network groups for businesses who may or may not be clients. So some of those are, some of them aren't, and they stand alone purely and simply as advisory. So the answer, I'm afraid, is yes, but both.
And Emma, I know this is something the Barringtons are specifically focusing on, particularly from 2020 onwards. Have you got a view on that one for us, please?
As Sean said, the answer is yes. You know, we look at what a client wants, and also make recommendations. You know, part of our client base is a standalone service of advisory if that's what they need. We have people coming to us who just want support with funding and cash flows and forecasting, so we can provide that. That runs alongside our weekly workshops that we are running at the moment. But we also have the typical client who would like the accounts preparation and the management accounts.
Great, thank you. We've heard a lot about the implementation and the journey towards advisory. Just interesting to ask maybe Paul and Joe. We'll start with Paul. What would you say to a practice owner that was contemplating adding advisory services to their overall offering for their clients?
I think the question means that you actually need to focus on yourself first, because how can I expect you to do things that I'm not doing myself? And I think what happens if you've been through the advisory journey yourself, so you have budgets, forecasts, etc., then I think you're in a much better position to actually explain to other people about the reason why they should do it, because this is something I do myself. It's do as I do, not do as I say. And I think once you've actually done that and you understand the pitfalls yourself about how you actually bring it all together, I think you're in a much better position to explain to your client base and to the business owners about why you need to do things.
Brilliant. So walk the talk, don't just talk the talk. Joe, from your perspective, please.
Yes, I'd just like to echo what Paul said, you know, practice what you preach. And in light of what we were discussing earlier with regards to compliance services, as we've seen with the introduction of Making Tax Digital, I firmly believe that compliance services are soon to be dead. So I would say that adding advisory services to your clients in today's accountancy world is crucial to survive and thrive.
Excellent, thank you. Steve, can we have the next question, please?
Of course. Did you do everything internally, or did you seek external help along the way?
Great question. If we can direct that to Mike, please.
Oh, I learned very early on to always seek external help, and our members of our team used to hate going on journeys with me, because there would also be CDs or tapes, even in the old days, where I'd be listening to people, you know, sort of gurus like Sean Farnell talking, you know, inciting me to behaving differently. But no, we were even part of a group where we actually went together to each other's firms to look critically and to offer support and constructive advice about me perhaps doing things differently. Because it doesn't matter how much you are, how clever you are, however experienced you are, there is nothing like somebody saying it who is independent of the firm to make people listen, whether it's your colleagues or whether it's your team. So we've learned that even if they're saying exactly the same thing as you are, they say it in a different way and people are more likely to listen. And you yourself will gain support from listening to somebody that might be repeating exactly what you are saying. So we can never stop learning. And I think it really is essential, especially in the accounting world, who is so trapped into thinking in old-fashioned ways in so many cases, and still are, that we should always be welcoming any thought input to make us think differently.
Great response. Thanks very much. So we've talked about advisory. We've talked about the implementation of advisory. We've got a few questions that have come in that relate to challenges. So it'd be good if we could focus on that for a period of time. So Steve, if we can talk about any questions that have come in that focus on the challenges that some of the guys might face.
Okay, so what was the greatest challenge you had to overcome on your journey into the world of advisory?
Okay, if we can, Joe, if we can start with you with that one, please.
Thanks, Mark. So the greatest challenge that I had to overcome on my journey into the world of advisory was, well, what do I do as a first port of call in terms of understanding what software is going to be suitable and appropriate for my practice in order to run advisory services for my clients. And that was a very easy win with the likes of VFD. So in terms of the greatest challenge, really, it couldn't be more easy for you really as a practice owner once you do understand the full scale and you know, the full scope of the VFD services.
Best response you've had so far today for a question, personally. Paul, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think in the early days, when I've been through various software, I used to print these glossy reports off and thrust them in front of clients thinking they'd actually understand that they want this glossy report. Whereas now I think I take the stance I need to understand the problems first and potentially how the reports are actually going to help me solve their problems. So all the VFD type reports, all the things that are available to us are just tools in the toolbox to enable us to understand what the client's problem is and what potential solutions that we as accountants and business advisors have to help them on their journey.
Great response. Thanks very much. Steve, can we have the next question, please?
Did you encounter any resistance from partners, managers or staff? And if so, what did you do to overcome that resistance?
Okay, I think I'll direct this to a couple of members of the panel that operate larger regional practices. So, Mike, if we can start with you, please. What have you experienced at an X5 that can help?
I've experienced over the years, and I still do. It's the busiest resistance I find is that swear word called busy. And so we're far too busy. You know, we've got so much work. Why do we need to be doing this? And clients don't want to pay for it. So because what they're interested in is just knowing what tax they've got to pay. They know how to run their business. What on earth do we think we've got the right to be able to advise them how to run their business? Which is all just an excuse to allow people to get back into their comfort zone. And it's I've had one today where one of my colleagues was desperate. One of their clients was desperate for some financial director services, and he just said, "We haven't got enough team to be able to do it." And I just couldn't believe this, because he was struggling as well with this whole busy concept, and he just thought, we just can't give the support, and was ready to roll over on his back. I think busy is the biggest resistance, but there's so many other areas where I find resistance. But they're all excuses in the end. They're all excuses, and I just don't tolerate the excuses. I'm not the easiest person when where you're focused on your goals, trying to help people understand. Just say those clients who want the help, for goodness sake, we've got to do what we can to help them, and don't use excuses about ourselves as a reason why we shouldn't give them.
Great, thanks. And Sean, have you got anything to add to that?
Thanks, Mark. Well, Mike's absolutely right. Time is the greatest killer of innovation in the accountancy sphere, I think. And there's two things at play. People genuinely are very busy, but one of the things that I've discovered when talking particularly to other firms is that there's a general misconception about what advisory is. Advisory is seen to be this all brand new, all singing, all dancing, the nirvana answer to all of our prayers, but nobody really knows what it is. And I think once you start to break it down, so my definition of advisory is purely and simply asking better questions. That's it. That's all advisory is asking better questions. Now, the tools that we use to enable us to ask those questions are out there, VFD being a great example. But yeah, I think getting across that misconception that you've not got to learn anything new. As accountants, we're really good at asking questions. The problem is we ask a really narrow focus of questions around finance and around tax generally. Well, if you are in the pub on a Friday night and you're chatting to a complete stranger, I bet you're going to ask some questions that don't involve accounts and tax. And that, for me, I think is one of the biggest hurdles that we find when talking to other partners, managers and team members. And the second part of the question, I think, was how did we overcome that resistance? Well, as well as that explanation, that explaining piece, there has to be a bit of recognition both within your team and within yourselves that isn't going to be for everybody. Not every member of every firm is going to be able to sit in front of a client and start to drill down into their dreams, their hopes, their aspirations and their frustrations. Some of us will find that easier than others. But then that's fine. You know, there are different areas of work in every firm, and even into the future, if we had an advisory only firm, there is still going to be a requirement for people to do the non-client facing side of that advisory work as well. So I think you've got to understand that it's not for everybody, and the best way to get over it, to overcome it, is to start to do it yourself. You know, I think I forget whether it's Paul, I think, said earlier, you know, do what I do, don't just do what I say. So if you can lead that change, I think that makes a big difference internally.
Great, thanks. I guess we've got a lot of people that will be watching this, that will be either starting out on their journey towards advisory or at least thinking about it. Emma, have you got any insight into potentially what the biggest and most costly mistakes are that others can learn from?
Okay, thanks, Mark. Well, I think really hindsight is a wonderful thing when we look at, you know, costly mistakes. Sitting back and thinking about that is, you know, the conversations that we have with clients need to focus more on future. So let's not sit there and dwell too much on the past. Let's focus on the future and make sure that we have that understanding of the businesses, but we are looking at how things are going to change and how businesses are going to grow and support them on that path.
Great, thanks very much. We talked a bit about the difficulties that come with moving into the advisory space, more so from the compliance world. Let's talk about the benefits of it. So, Steve, can we start with some questions that relate to the benefits of moving into this world?
Yeah, we've got a good one here. So in terms of fee income, how much more is an advisory client worth your practice when you compare it to the clients who only take the bare minimum for compliance?
Great question. Paul, let's start with you with that one, please.
I think if you've got someone who wants to do more in terms of advisory, wants some more help, typically for us, that would be 2 to 3 times what the normal compliance fee would be.
Wow, as much as that. Joe, have you got anything to add to that, please?
Yeah, I'd like to agree with Paul, and I'd say the potential scope of an advisory client compared to your standard compliance client is 2 to 3 times the fee income. Now, if I think back to our largest advisory client, where we're technically the part-time FD, the fees that we get from that particular client, especially on a monthly basis, do reach into the thousands compared to standard compliance services being, you know, a fraction of that cost. So depending on the scope and the time involved and, you know, the issues that client is going through and the advisory services required, I'd say that there's possibilities and the fees could be endless, really, depending on what advisory services they are looking for in particular.
Great, so it is all worthwhile. Steve, can we have the next question, please? Yeah.
Do you find business owners are receptive to the offer of management information and part-time finance director services?
So if we can start off with Robert on this one, as a part-time finance director, can you give a response to that question, please?
You'd like to think that they'd all be receptive. In my experience, they're not. So the challenge is to demonstrate that management information is far more than just understanding a P&L. There isn't a business owner I've met that doesn't claim to understand their own profit and loss, but very few of them can actually understand what the key drivers within their business are that will create that profit or indeed a loss. So providing you can demonstrate that the MR is relevant to them, and that's in so much there are things in there that they can recognize are happening in their business, that it's comprehensive, so you can identify things they didn't realize that were happening in their business, and most importantly, it's timely, so you're telling them about something that they have a chance to influence. Then why not? Shouldn't they be receptive to the offer of MI? And then from then on, the next logical step is the very cost-effective step of employing a part-time FD, because armed with that MI, it can then start to demonstrate how the business can benefit from some of the decisions that the owner would take, and how you can ensure that there's appropriate resource within the business to make those decisions, put those decisions into practice, so they can happen. And then you've got the monitoring and the evaluation of the success of those decisions, and perhaps the re-evaluation going forward.
Great, thanks very much. So we're coming to the end now. We've got one final question. This is for you all to get your crystal ball out, and I'll give you each an opportunity to answer this one, but if we can keep the answers short, it would be appreciated. So what do you think the biggest change is going to be in the accounting profession in the next 5 to 10 years? If we can start, please, with Mike.
Interesting. I think there will be a room for compliance, but compliance mixed with advisory, in that I think there will be much fewer internal accounts departments in companies. I think that function will be outsourced to accountants who specialise in providing fast, efficient information, and then the advisory finance director function role on top of it.
Fantastic. Joe.
Yeah, completely agree with Mike. And going back to the compliance points, you know, with AI and robotics progressing, I do believe in 5 to 10 years, gone are going to be the days of people sifting through paper accounts and producing tax returns. I think a lot of compliance will be taken over by automated technology. So the role of the advisor is going to be even more prevalent.
Excellent. Robert, go with you from you, please.
Yes, as Joe's intimated, I believe that as technology advances, audits themselves will become shorter and therefore cheaper. So that's the voice of an FD. And clients through MTD will be able to submit their own tax returns. So whilst there'll always be a need for tax advice in the future, but it's all about, as Paul said, companies that are using any one of those 6 forward gears far more than it is about the using that reverse gear.
Thank you. Paul.
I think we're going to have a period of increased competition, and I think we're already starting to see it, where some of my clients have received quotes from people in India prepared to do their accounts as cheap as possible. So I think we're going to have a downward pressure on our compliance fees, and I think that will mean that we need to look at additional services and build stronger relationships with our clients to actually go forward.
Fantastic. Emma, how about yourself, please?
Sure. So building really on what Robert said, the move towards sort of MTD and the need for real-time information, bolted on with the increase in AI and technology, everything's going to be on a now basis. So the need to move from that compliance to advisory, it's a must, and it's gonna happen.
Thank you. And last but by no means least, Sean.
Oh no, quite probably least. Really, just agree with what everybody else has said. You know, the imminent implementation of MTD is forcing businesses to use cloud, to use digital technologies. Once they start, they're going to want more, they're going to do more for themselves. Compliance is definitely on the way out. I think Mike's right. I think there will be an element of outsourcing, and equally Paul's correct insofar as we now have globalization of compliance work as well. It's easy. You can be anywhere in the world and process invoices or process bank accounts. You know, you don't have to be next door to the business or within the business. And similarly, COVID's going to make a difference as well, because we're now all quite used to sitting here at home talking to the computer all day. So why does my accountant have to be in the same town that I'm in? Well, they don't, or the same city or the same country even. So I think all of these are fairly significant challenges that we have to face. And the only, as far as I can see it, the only added value as accountants we've got for our business clients is that advisory, is that being their genuine partner, working with them to help them with their business, not necessarily doing the adding up. So yeah, there's a lot of pressures on accountants at the moment and over the next 5 years or so.
Ladies, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.